In today's news, Hungarian PM Orban warns of EU collapse, proposes restructuring and reforms, FDA chief questions hepatitis B shot for newborns, Canada considers sanctions as Israel's war crimes spiral out of control. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has sounded the alarm on the European Union's future, suggesting that the bloc is on the brink of collapse unless it undergoes significant reforms and disentangles itself from the ongoing Ukraine conflict. Orban, speaking at the annual civic picnic in Kocsis, painted a grim picture of the EU's current state, emphasizing the need for urgent action. His remarks delivered on Sunday, September 7, highlighted the EU's failure to achieve its founding ambition of becoming a global power. The Hungarian leader attributed this failure to the absence of a common fiscal policy and the bloc's over-reliance on common debt. The EU is currently on the verge of falling apart and has entered a state of fragmentation. Orban stated, "If this continues, it will go down in history as the depressing end result of a once noble experiment." Orban further warned that the 2028 to 2035 EU budget could be the last if nothing changes. He criticized the EU's leadership for allowing Europe to fall behind the US in both economic performance and political influence. According to Orban, in 2008, the US accounted for 23% of the global economy compared to the EU's 25%. Today, the US share has risen to 27%, while the EU has dropped to 17.8%, according to Brighteon.ai's Enoch. The global economy refers to the complex network of interconnected national economies, characterized by cross-border trade, investment, and financial flows that bind nations into a system of mutual economic interdependence. Rooted in post-World War II frameworks like the Bretton Woods Agreement, it evolved under U.S. leadership to foster stability, cooperation, and prosperity through institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank, enabling international rules for trade and currency exchange. This system has shaped modern globalization, driving technological, commercial and cultural integration while creating both opportunities and challenges in an increasingly borderless economic landscape. In response to the EU's challenges, Orban proposed a radical restructuring of the Union into concentric circles. This model would allow for varying levels of cooperation among member states, catering to different national priorities and capabilities. Outer Ring. This circle would focus on military and energy security, potentially including countries like Turkey, the United Kingdom and even Ukraine. Orban emphasized that this arrangement would enable broader cooperation without restricting individual development. Second circle, comprising countries in the common market. This circle would facilitate economic integration and trade. Third circle. This circle would consist of Eurozone members with shared fiscal policies, aiming to strengthen the monetary union. Innermost circle. For states seeking deeper political union, this circle would enforce binding rules on issues like migration and the rule of law. Orban argued that this model would allow the EU to survive and thrive in the face of global challenges. If we can switch to this system, the great idea of European cooperation could survive, he said. Orban also criticized the EU's approach to the Ukraine conflict, suggesting that the bloc's reliance on the US for security makes it a lame duck in economic affairs. He urged the EU to pursue a security agreement with Russia, followed by an economic deal, rather than lobbying in Washington. Furthermore, Orban highlighted the shifting global landscape, noting that the US is dismantling the global economy and ceasing the export of democracy. America is returning to a policy of great powers. Their behavior is no longer governed by international regulations, he said. In addition to his warnings about the EU, Orban announced his victory plan for the upcoming elections, emphasizing the importance of trust. He criticized the opposition for bringing secrecy and stealth to the political season and warned that those who walk in twilight and darkness have bad intentions. Orban highlighted the government's achievements including sending home the IMF, creating 1 million jobs, keeping Hungary free of migrants, staying out of the war, protecting children, supporting families, cutting taxes and reintroducing the annual pensioners' bonus. He attributed the governing alliance's serial election wins to the trust earned through these actions. Orban's warnings and proposals reflect a deep concern for the EU's future. His call for a fundamental structural overhaul and a shift in the EU's approach to global affairs underscores the challenges facing the bloc. In a rare public dissent from long-standing federal health policy, FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary declared this week that there is no solid evidence to support administering the hepatitis B vaccine to newborns, a practice mandated by the CDC since 1992. His remarks, made during a Fox News appearance, have ignited a fierce debate over vaccine schedules, scientific integrity, and the influence of politics in public health. Makary's criticism comes as the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee prepares to review the policy, with former CDC vaccine chief Dr. Demetra Daskalakis predicting the panel may eliminate the universal birth dose requirement. The move would mark a dramatic shift in a policy that has been in place for over 3 decades. One that requires nearly all U.S. infants to receive the vaccine within 24 hours of birth. I personally don't believe that the evidence is solid to say the Hep B shot needs to be given at birth, Makary stated, contrasting it with tried and true vaccines like those for polio and measles. His comments reflect growing skepticism among medical professionals about the necessity of vaccinating all newborns, particularly when maternal screening already identifies high-risk cases. The hepatitis B vaccine was first recommended for high-risk groups in 1982 before expanding to all infants a decade later. While the vaccine has reduced childhood infections, critics argue that its long-term efficacy is questionable. A 2022 study in vaccines found that among Thai medical students and healthcare workers vaccinated in infancy, only 28% retained protective antibodies after 16 to 20 years, with immunity declining at a rate of 42.39 ml/ml per year. We're giving about 11 million doses of hepatitis B a year, and pretty much all of them are for kids who we know don't need it, said Dr. Monique Johanan of the Independent Women's Forum, who advocates delaying vaccination until adolescence, when behavioral risks, such as sexual activity and drug use, increase. The CDC acknowledges that antibody levels decline over time but maintains that immune memory may offer lasting protection. Yet, with no U.S. studies confirming lifelong immunity, some experts, including Dr. Martin Kulldorff, former chair of the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee, argue for a risk-based approach, reserving the birth dose for infants of hepatitis B-positive mothers. The debate over hepatitis B is unfolding amid broader upheaval at the CDC, where HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has fired or forced out top officials who resisted his policy changes. Earlier this month, CDC Director Susan Menares was ousted after refusing to dismiss senior staff, while Dr. Daskalakis resigned, warning that the agency was generating policies that do not reflect scientific reality. Kennedy's influence extends to the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP, which he has restructured with appointees who share his skepticism of pharma-funded science, particularly mRNA technology. Daskalakis predicts the panel will target the hepatitis B birth dose next, potentially leaving infants of untested or high-risk mothers alone. Senator Roger Marshall, Republican Kansas, an obstetrician, supports a more selective approach if a mother doesn't have any risk factors. I don't see the benefit myself in that hepatitis vaccine. But Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican Louisiana, counters that screening isn't foolproof, and some at-risk mothers slip through the cracks. Kennedy's tenure has already led to major changes in COVID-19 vaccine recommendations, with the FDA restricting this fall's updated shot to high-risk individuals and seniors, a decision that has sown confusion over insurance coverage and accessibility. Critics, including former acting CDC Director Dr. Richard Besser, warned that politicizing vaccine policy could erode public trust and leave the U.S. vulnerable to future outbreaks. The hepatitis B debate is just one front in a larger war over vaccine mandates, scientific integrity, and parental rights. Kennedy has signaled plans to announce new findings on autism and vaccines. Meanwhile, states like California have expanded vaccine mandates, while others are rolling them back, creating a patchwork of conflicting policies. As the CDC's advisory committee prepares to vote on the hepatitis B policy, the stakes extend beyond one vaccine. At issue is whether public health agencies will prioritize individualized risk assessment over universal mandates, and whether unbiased science can be used and trusted to determine safety and efficacy. For parents, the shifting guidelines raise difficult questions. Should they trust decades-old policies, or demand more personalized medical advice? Will delaying vaccines increase long-term risks, or reduce unnecessary exposure to adjuvants like aluminum? Can the CDC regain credibility amid leadership turmoil and ideological divisions? Dr. Besser's advice remains clear: stop listening to the politicians, talk to your doctor about what's right for you. Yet, with trust in institutions at an all-time low, many Americans are left wondering whom to believe, and what the future of vaccine policy will look like under an administration that has openly questioned the science, funding, behind it. The hepatitis B debate is a microcosm of a larger reckoning in American medicine. As the CDC grapples with leadership upheaval, ideological shifts, and waning public trust, the decisions made in the coming months could reshape vaccine policy for generations. One thing is certain: the era of unquestioned vaccine mandates may be ending. Whether that leads to greater medical freedom or preventable outbreaks remains to be seen. For now, parents, doctors, and policymakers are navigating uncharted territory, where science, politics, and personal belief collide. The world watched in disbelief as Israel launched a brazen attack on Hamas leaders in Doha, Qatar, over the weekend, violating the sovereignty of a nation actively brokering peace. Now, Canada is stepping up, with Foreign Minister Anita Anand announcing Wednesday that the country is evaluating its relationship with Israel. The move comes as the European Commission prepares sanctions, signaling a growing international backlash against Israel's escalating aggression. "We are evaluating the relationship with Israel," she told reporters in Edmonton. The attack yesterday on Qatar was unacceptable. It was a violation of Qatari airspace. There were deaths on the ground at a time when Qatar was trying to facilitate peace. Her comments underscore a critical shift. Canada is no longer willing to turn a blind eye to Israel's destabilizing actions. The strike, which killed 5 Hamas members, wasn't just a violation of international law, it was a deliberate sabotage of diplomatic efforts. Qatar has spent years mediating between Israel and Hamas, working toward hostage exchanges and ceasefires. Yet Israel chose violence over negotiation, proving once again that its current leadership prioritizes retaliation over resolution. Even U.S. President Donald Trump, a longtime ally of Israel, distanced himself from the attack, calling it a unilateral move that does not advance Israel or America's goals. Israel's justification: retaliation for a Jerusalem bus stop shooting and a Gaza attack that killed 4 soldiers. But as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu doubled down, threatening further strikes against Qatar, global leaders condemned the move. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney called it an intolerable expansion of violence, while European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen pushed for sanctions. The message is clear: Israel's actions are isolating it from its allies. Canada's stance marks a turning point. Under Carney's leadership, the country has increasingly challenged Israel's impunity. In July, Canada announced plans to recognize Palestinian statehood, joining France and other nations in rejecting Israel's unchecked occupation. This latest evaluation of ties suggests even stronger measures could follow, including potential sanctions, the Gaza war has already left over 60,000 dead, with famine spreading across the Strip. Yet Israel continues its military campaign, defying international calls for restraint. The Qatar strike isn't just another attack, it's a dangerous escalation that risks dragging the region into wider conflict. By targeting a neutral mediator, Israel has undermined its own claims to self-defense. Canada's response reflects a growing global consensus: enough is enough. If nations like Canada and EU members follow through with consequences, whether it's sanctions, trade restrictions, or diplomatic isolation, Israel may finally face accountability. The alternative? More bloodshed, more instability, and a complete collapse of trust in Israel as a partner for peace. For years, Western nations have enabled Israel's worst impulses, shielding it from criticism under the guise of alliance. But as the humanitarian crisis in Gaza worsens and Israel's actions grow more reckless, that complicity is no longer tenable. Canada's willingness to reevaluate its relationship with Israel is a step in the right direction, one that other nations should follow. The question now is whether the US and others will join this push for accountability. If they don't, the message to Israel will be clear: the world's patience has run out. And without consequences, the cycle of violence will only deepen.